Trust is the one thing every leader says they want more of, and the one thing that most are quietly getting wrong. There's a belief it's built through competence or charisma, and then we're surprised when the team goes quiet and the exec room gets political, and the organization just stops believing what leadership says. I'm Kim Bohr, President and CEO of Spark Effect and host of the Courage to Advance podcast. And today I'm with Andrea Butcher. Andrea is an executive coach, keynote speaker, founder of Abundant Empowerment, and host of the Being at Work podcast. She also had me on her show recently to dig into our trust research. So today we get to flip it and talk about how trust gets built. We have a lot to cover, so let's dive in. Andrea, welcome to Courage to Advance.
Oh, Kim, I'm so glad to be here. There's nothing I would rather be doing than having a conversation about leadership with you.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to continue our conversation from when I was on your podcast, Being at Work, where we discussed our Spark Effect State of Organizational Trust Report. And for listeners, we will put that link in the show notes because it's absolutely a must listen to and getting exposed to Andrea's podcast. And so today what we want to do is really continue that conversation by talking about ways to build trust, because that is at the center of what so many challenges are for leaders today. So before we dig in, talk a little bit about, from your experience in working with leaders across all kinds of organizations, why does trust feel like it's the conversation we need to be having right now?
Oh, gosh. I mean, isn't it the foundation of every single relationship we have? And leadership is a relationship. And what's so interesting about trust is we are always evolving in relationship. And the level of trust that I feel on one day may feel very different than the level of trust I feel on another day. I also think it's important for us to zoom out and define what we mean by trust. Because a lot of times people think about predictive trust. Like, are you going to show up in the way that I expect you to show up? And as I think about relational trust, as I think about building trust as a leader or an executive inside of an organization, I like to think about it as vulnerability-based trust. And I don't know if it was did Patrick Lencioni actually coin that phrase? I know it's used a lot now, but I first heard it as a part of the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team many, many years ago. And so vulnerability-based trust, even that language reinforces the messiness of trust, the awkwardness of trust. And why is it so important right now? Because the world is stressed. Leaders are struggling. There's so much noise. And so taking the time to reflect on the level of connection and vulnerability in our relationships is so important, but it's hard.
It is. It is. And I think I really like that clarity you say through vulnerability, because that does give us the space to, it's not about perfectionism. It is about learning and growing and, recognizing mistakes, but still showing up with those values that we all consider to be trustworthy. What's interesting is that's still a challenge in so many organizations and leaders in these organizations right now. So your work centers on the being of leadership, that real important internal stuff, not just the doing. And this is an area that we share a very strong connection in the work that we're both doing in our organizations. How does a leader who is in these moments really shape whether trust is actually forming around them? So how do they form that trust around themselves in these really critical moments?
Yeah, such an important question. One of the things I talk about a lot in the work of leadership development is equipping leaders to be more of who they already are versus responding to a set of competencies or a list of leadership attributes. And the reason I start with that is because aren't we naturally drawn to individuals and leaders who just show up in a way that's consistent with who they are? Is there something so refreshing about that? And so as I think about my experiences with executive and leadership teams, like when I see trust being formed or connection being built, it's when there's an authenticity. It's when there's an honesty in how people are showing up and a willingness, Kim, to take the armor off.
Yes.
Because we often show up to these executive rooms trying to prove ourselves, trying to fight for the floor
Mhm.
and some
Mhm.
airtime. And in that, we unintentionally hinder the connection and the trust. So, this willingness to just drop the armor, stop pretending,
Mhm.
be really honest about our struggles and our challenges. I'll tell you a quick story. I was with an executive team. It's a growing healthcare technology company. I was with them recently and going in, I obviously spent lots of time with the CEO and the head of HR shaping our experience. And that they had both shared on numerous occasions, the CEO is naturally like very driven. He's not naturally a receptive, open guy. He is driving the charge on growth for this very innovative, dynamic company. And so that's how he shows up in a very dynamic, innovative, fast-paced way. But he said, like, for this experience that we're going to have as a leadership team, like, because we've grown so much, there are leaders I don't know. And so fortunately, he had the foresight to recognize, like, it's important for us to spend time like getting to know each other. And I
Mhm.
could see him as the leaders came together over those couple of days. I could see him being really intentional about not jumping in and
Yeah.
letting others have the floor and seeking people out. Ray, what do you think about that? Because Ray is a
Mhm.
quieter leader within the team. And over the course of that time, you could see the connection. You could also see within the room this environment of people really wanting to engage and be a part of this because of the environment that he created
Mhm.
with those trust building behaviors.
That's such a great example. What do you say in that kind of moment when I agree with you, having leaders lean into what they're doing so well? What if what they do so well sometimes tips over to being counterproductive? They're over indexing on a certain trait, if you will, that then starts to counter their well intended actions. How do you work with leaders in those
It's a great point, and
situations?
it's why emotional intelligence is so important. So I got to know myself so that I can manage that, and I have to know what the environment calls for. And I think this example of this leader is a good one, right? Again, he shows up in a very dynamic, driven, focused way, like naturally. He recognized there are leaders on this team I need to get to know. Like, that is not going to serve me well. I need to be more empathic and receptive and open. So it's not a we are adaptable human beings, and it's not a capability issue as much as it is an intentionality issue.
Yeah. Yes. Totally agree with that.
Which is why giving ourselves the headspace and the heart space to be able to take a step back and reflect. If we're in the grind all day long, like, we don't have the headspace to do that.
Right.
Our focus is literally hijacked by all of the things around us. So just taking a beat and trusting our intuition. I mean, we are connective in our humanness. So paying attention to that little nudge, like, oh, that's probably not the thing for me to do right now. Right.
Yeah, that gut, listening to that gut, that instinct, that feeling, the sense we have, we all
Yeah.
get that. And so we just not always are paying attention to it and really recognizing that it is telling us something.
The thing that it all comes back to for me, Kim, in building trust is focus on what's going on within you. Like, focus on
Yes.
what's going on within you. We want to make it their fault, or we want to point to
Mm.
that's why I. But as soon as we do that, like, we have disconnected from ourselves. You know, let's use this leader as an example, because you and I have both heard so many times, like, when leaders are like really strong in their points of view and very results oriented, like they're bulldozers, they're assholes, they're
Mhm.
all the names we call.
Yep.
And as soon as we do that, as soon as we put that label on them, I think we've just disempowered ourselves. Like,
Yes.
is that true? Like, maybe, but perhaps they're just a human being doing the best they can with what they have where they are. You know,
Mhm.
so if relationship and trust and connection is important with that individual, I need to start with, okay, I've just labeled them this, so I am hindering building
Yes.
trust in that situation. Like, maybe asking a question or being curious or seeking to understand the pressure that they feel. Why are they being an asshole? Like, there's got to be a psychological need driving
Right.
driving that.
Right. It's few people that walk in with that as their goal every day. And it's understanding why we're perceiving it that way too.
Right.
I think that's really powerful, and I couldn't agree more. In our organizations, our teams do a lot of work with executive teams, and I'm finding a lot of trust conversations needing to happen where there's just a lack of trust, and maybe it's shaped in, couched in other words. But we're finding that, on the surface, there's a lot of fraying, whether it's the internal politics, siloed agendas, managers trying to, kind of keep their personas of who they want to be,
Right.
protected. What's the most common trust breakdowns that you've been seeing in some of that C-suite work you're doing?
So much of the time it comes back to unclear or unmet expectations.
Yeah. Oh,
That
such a
they're
great.
that
Yeah.
they're making assumptions without having clarified.
Mhm.
They're not seeking to understand other perspectives. I think that's one. I also see, because there is just so many competing priorities right now, I see a lot of leaders that are working towards the same goal in very different ways without
Mhm.
collaborating or working together. And so what ends up happening, because we know it all flows downhill from that executive team,
Right.
what ends up happening then is you have departmental challenges or rifts because of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's that territorial nature that comes in,
Yeah,
and I think people sometimes they think they're collaborating, they're really not. And, we've seen that a lot too, and it's been interesting, and a team I've been working with where there's just some strongly held beliefs that we can't do certain things because of it exposing, you know, somebody, like a situation of, a performance situation. And yet the C level of the teams are finding out when somebody's been removed at the same time everybody else is. And that's really disruptive to their own ways of planning. There's some interesting kind of rules of engagement that I think are need to be discussed around how do we do work and how do we work together
you
that
got
is
it.
missing. And I think that's very much what you're saying
Yeah,
in
that
that same
alignment.
vein.
Because
Yeah.
then you've got a glue that binds, don't you? So you've got something to come back to in those challenging moments.
So when you walk into a dysfunctional executive team, what do you notice first? What signals tell you that trust is the real issue that's underlying their dynamics?
If they're not willing to tell the truth in the group. Yeah, I mean,
They
I
dance
think
around it. They start to
yeah,
say, well,
right, they
or they're really
rationalize
quiet.
it.
That's yeah.
Yes. And then you do one-on-one sessions and you hear all of the things. So a big part of it is creating an environment where they can disagree and they can share. I think that one of the things that gets in the way of that is we're so afraid of conflict. And we
Yes.
have, and you've seen this, hundreds and hundreds of times where you anticipate going into a hard conversation, this reaction that ends up not being nearly as
Completely. Yeah.
dramatic as you thought it would be. Like, oh, over and over and over. So, yeah, those hard conversations, being willing to tell the truth in a respectful, helpful way, like those are
Yeah.
the things that build trust.
Well, and I always find that if a team can agree on, why we're here, why we're doing the work, we start to anchor into that mission and the vision. And if we're truly living those values, then we need to be coming forward with these difficult conversations without fear of
Ab-
retribution. And I think
absolutely.
there's a lot of disconnect there because there used to be I can't remember this, but the saying years ago I heard was, all conversations are with myself and sometimes they involve other people, right? And it is that, like, we tell these stories in our heads and we just can't, when they become so true, then we just start to believe them, and that so
Right.
directly is a part of then how we show up.
You got it, which is why, like, you got to check in with yourself. What
Very
is the
every
story
day.
you're telling? What is going
Yeah.
on within you? Yeah, because that's what you're projecting into the world. It is such a good point about we're all walking around as the lead character in our own story. So why would we expect, you know, to always be functioning as a healthy team? Like, no, like dysfunction is a natural part of the dynamic
Right.
and the messiness. The key is, are we acknowledging the dysfunction? Are we willing to name it and struggle through it together? Like, isn't
Yes,
that the mark of a great team? The dysfunction isn't the
absolutely.
problem.
Right. It's the how we
How we
resolve
address it.
it
You got it.
and then move forward and not just ignore it
Are we
or,
willing? Yep.
yes.
Are we
Such a
willing?
great point.
Mhm.
Something that we released recently in a leadership development series focused on a really powerful question that I bet you bring forward into your work. And it was we often have a to-do list, but we don't have a to be list. And
Mm.
that to be list really is so focused on, how do I want to be in this dynamic? How do I want to be in this situation? And I think that's very much what you're speaking to as well. If we think about it from our own, when we're going into something we know is difficult, how do I want to show up and contribute? But that's such a simple question. And yet when we're in the flow of things can be so challenging to actually
Sure.
ask ourselves.
Yes, which is why we need these rhythms of connecting and paying attention to what's happening within us, because then we can get closer to the moment, can't we? And we can start to see, like, oh, okay, there's that tension, that internal tension that's bumping up against my need to control or my need to belong or my need for harmony or my need for accuracy. Yeah, it's a coaching participant recently is a natural connector, and she's naturally innovative in her approach. And she was sharing with her finance team an idea around a new product. And naturally, the finance team was asking a lot of questions. And so when we jumped on a call, she immediately, like, they crushed my dreams. They don't ever want to. And I'm thinking, like, oh, I'm so glad we have this space to reflect.
Yeah.
And so I asked, like what part of that, like, do you own? Like, let's break it down. And what was happening, she has a need for belonging and connection. She also
Mhm.
has a high need to be liked and to be seen. And so as soon as they started asking questions, like, that in her system registered a threat against connection, a threat against being liked. So, yeah, it is never what's happening out there. It is always what's happening in
Mhm.
here. And just knowing that as soon as we start to feel that tension, like, okay, this is not the time for me to talk, right? This is the time for me to get quiet with myself and see what's going on there before I respond, so that I can respond in a way that is doing the thing I want to do. Because what ends up happening a lot in that scenario is, because she has a need to connect, she's going to keep going. She's going to keep going. She's going to keep going, right? And keep trying to get connection versus really addressing what they're asking to be addressed.
That is a really powerful point you make. And I think I can see that showing up in dynamics as well, where the just that need of feeling like you haven't been heard or seen or really acknowledged, because the person interprets that differently than I would, has that feeling of, well, I need to keep trying to make this point because you're clearly not reacting in a way that has me understanding that you've taken it in.
Exactly. And that our needs and motivators are all very, very different. I share her that same style. Like I have a high need to be heard and to belong and to connect, and FOMO is a thing for me. But there's a lot of people who maybe on some degree, but not as prevalent as those needs for me. So I think about my partner, for example. I mean, for him, it's about accuracy, it's about competence, it's about being right. Those things will compromise his need to be seen or to connect.
Yes.
So we can
Boy, I
often
identify with those two you
yeah.
shared.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of leaders, assume trust with their teams gets built through being competent or being liked. What's really happening in that relationship, and where do leaders most often get it wrong, especially leaders earlier in their leadership careers?
So I go back to the predictive trust. I think we're thinking about trust, like, do they do what they say they will do, which is a really important thing. But it's like it's the surface level trust.
Yep.
Yeah, I always encourage leaders to take time to really understand the person, like build the relationship. Leadership is a relationship, so get to know their values and what fuels them, what energizes them, what drains them, so that we can then, because that's where it's at. That's where connection happens. We can meet them where they are, not where we are.
Right. And I think that does get forgotten in the busyness of work at times.
Yeah, it's assumed, isn't it?
Right.
Like, yeah, we brought this person in to do a job. They're going to do it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget that they still need to be led and guided and heard and understood.
That we have an opportunity to enable them to perform. And the enabling is the building trust, the collaborating, the creating the conditions for them to be the best they can be.
So if we think about trust at that organizational level, and as you and I talked about on your podcast, there's a lot breaking down in organizations that are doing all the trust breakers, as we talked about. Employees are often, reading signals from leaders that they barely interact with, especially when we start to think about, multi-layers. From your point of view, how are you seeing trust being built or broken at that scale when we're seeing it in more of a system level of issue?
For me, it all goes back to the environment that the leader is creating. What's the Gallup research that, the 70% of an employee's satisfaction is based on the relationship with their leader, especially in those large organizations. You think of the company, you think about that relationship.
Totally. Yeah. You expect them to have your back, right?
Yes.
And to be looking out for your best interests.
Right. Equipping, encouraging leaders to actually lead, to be intentional about the environment that they're creating.
Where it seems so simple, often leaders get really hosed up in how they go about it.
It's a great point.
What do you see leaders misunderstanding about their behavior that gets interpreted incorrectly? And what are some of those things you think they should be doing, even at the most basic level on a day-to-day basis, to help build that trust?
Yeah, let's talk about like bringing a new team member into your organization. Mm-hmm. I think we get tripped up by the formality of onboarding. We have a form, we have a plan. That is not the thing that's going to create connection. This, like having a conversation, seeking to understand, asking, like, tell me about your family. Tell me about like who's important in your life. Mm-hmm. I read something one time, it really stuck with me, that like the base litmus test for what you should know about your team, you should be able to name the people that are most important in their life and the animals that are most important in their life. Because think about how, like, that is our world. And
Totally.
so just asking, like, how did Mason do in her performance last weekend? Like, you see me, like,
Yeah.
what's important in my world.
Yes.
So it's the natural. I think you make a good point about we make it harder than it needs to be.
Mhm.
We feel like there's this, this checklist. And yes, there are some important things like for onboarding that are important, but that's not where engagement happens. That's
Right.
not where connection happens. It's taking the time to have the conversation.
Absolutely. So, what's something about trust that you've come to believe more deeply after years of doing this work?
I'm just going to take a deep breath and check in with myself. You're always working on trust.
Mhm.
That it's not like I'm going to get to a place in my relationships and be able to check the box and say, good, that one's good.
Right.
Every communication, every email, every text, every Slack, everything I put out there is either building or eroding.
Mhm.
It is a daily personal leadership challenge to pay attention. And when it starts to erode, you'll appreciate this. A couple of years ago, I was at a networking event and I ran into a woman that had reported to me years ago.
Oh, wow.
And she told me in this conversation, she told me about a time where I had really hurt her when she was reporting to me. And that was the language that she used, Kim. And
Wow.
she went into detail about this experience that really tore into the trust she had in me. And I could not remember it, Kim. She
Yeah.
and no doubt what she was telling was true of her experience because she remembered it in so much detail.
Right.
And so I was heartbroken, and I said, "Oh my gosh, April, I first of all, I am so sorry that I made you feel that way. Like, I want to acknowledge that." And she kind of laughed and she said, "Well, because we had such a good foundation and so many good experiences, like, I forgave and forgot." And so it was just such a good reminder to me. And I was so grateful. I told her, like, I wish you would have told me then. She was like,
Right.
well, we were right in the middle of performance reviews and talent calibration meetings, and we didn't have time. But fortunately, we had so many other positive experiences. But I'm so glad she told me. And it is now with the team that I lead today, it is so important that I create an environment where they can raise their hand and say, hey, that didn't land quite right. We talk so much about, like, we're moving so quickly, like, say it in the moment, say it in the moment. And I do, like, my colleague Nicole, who leads operations for us, just last week, she was like, hey, I want to circle back to something. She's a processor, so she does a lot of circling back.
Yep.
And every time she does that, I am so grateful, because what are we doing? We're strengthening trust.
Yes.
And it is a reflection to me that, okay, there's an environment, even if it doesn't feel good, we have an environment where we can say the thing that needs to be said.
Yep. Yep. That is such a great example, both of those. And thinking about how long, even though she felt so much that she forgave you, she still carried that
Mhm.
experience with her in a way that is really, it's that's pretty powerful. And then to
Yeah.
think about the opportunity for you two to, in some ways, to reconcile it, for you to come full circle on it when it was brought back to you. That is just a really amazing example of how the impact we can have, and maybe when we don't even realize it.
You got it. Yeah. I podcasted about that story recently for that very reason. Like, you never know the impact that you're having. And so
You
it's a
never.
reminder to check in, ask for feedback.
It
Yeah.
really is.
Mhm.
As we wrap up, I want to make sure we give people the opportunity to reach out to you and to connect with you. I think what you are doing is really powerful, and more people need to be exposed to your work. So, where can people
Yeah.
find you?
Our business is abundant empowerment, and we are expanding what's possible for humanity by developing leaders who live fully, lead consciously, and create conditions for others to do the same. So you've heard in my stories and the examples I've described. I mean, it for us, it is all about creating space. We are really good at co-creating experiences with our clients to give them the space to tell the truth, to do the hard work, to take the armor off over a period of time. I mean, we know this is not work that, okay, good, we had a conversation and we're done. So we do a lot of tracking and measuring and checking in and highlighting and coming alongside the journey. It is truly a facilitator role.
Yeah.
Facilitating all of the dynamics. It is, and like the messier, the better, you know?
Yeah.
I so believe in people. I have a huge belief in people, and I trust life. Life is giving us exactly what we need. So those dysfunctional team members that are challenging you the most are the greatest growth opportunity.
Oh my
It is
gosh.
life's way of saying, are you ready to level up? The challenge is there. Like the challenge is giving you an opportunity to do something different. Like step into it. I often think of those big challenges as a portal. Like I get to choose, do I want to walk through it and do something different, or do I want to react the same old way? I always do. Do I want to bitch? Do I want to complain? Do I want to blame it on them? No growth happening there.
Yeah. I can't agree with you more. The idea of the more challenging situations, when I think back in my own career, I've grown the most from always. And that's where I, tell people that sometimes when they're going through those situations, I'm like, this is where you're growing the most. So actually, especially when you're younger and doing it, I'm like, this is great. It's setting you up for so much in your career that you're experiencing this now.
You got it. Agree completely.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for coming on to our podcast and sharing the stories. I'm really excited for our audience to be able to hear the experiences that you've shared and go checking out our conversation on your podcast as well. And I think I've been really energized in the conversation. So thank you.
Right back at you, Kim. And I think I have such an abundance mentality, which is why I named my business Abundant Empowerment. A few years ago, I had this epiphany because I always kind of felt like, well, I'm not really saying anything new. Like, what's the new thing? And I'm like, no, it's about reminding and saying things in different ways, respond to people in different ways at different times. And so I think it takes all of us doing this work to create those opportunities and reminders. So right back at you. I'm so grateful for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. For our listeners, we have resources relevant to our conversation today that you can access by visiting couragetoadvancepodcast.com. And remember to like and share our podcasts on your favorite platform so more leaders can benefit from these conversations. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Courage to Advance, where transformative leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to find them.